The 1970s were a time of bold fashion, some pretty wild inventions, and endless creativity. From funky gadgets to colorful trends, it felt like anything and everything was possible. But while some ideas became timeless classics, others took a pretty strange turn and completely flopped. So let's take a look at some of the bizarre products that never should have made it past the drawing board. The 70s were an era of bold experimentation, and nowhere was this more obvious than in the kitchen. Manufacturers promised convenience and fun, but sometimes their inventions were just disasters in disguise. Take the fondue fountain, marketed as the ultimate party centerpiece. Shimmering chocolate would cascade endlessly over skewered fruit, creating a vision of decadent indulgence. Oh, but in practice, it leaked, it clogged, and often splattered chocolate across countertops, carpets, and unsuspecting guests. A decadent dream turned into a sticky nightmare. Oh, then there was the electric pancake printer, a gadget that promised perfectly shaped pancakes at the push of a button. In theory, it allowed users to print designs onto pancakes. We're talking cartoons, letters, even faces. In reality, it jammed constantly, misfired batter, and produced odd blobs rather than the charming shapes it advertised. Breakfast became frustration, and the fun gadget earned a permanent spot in the drawer of shame. Despite the failures, these appliances reflected the era's ambition. Creativity unrestrained, ideas tested, sometimes rather catastrophically. The kitchen was the first battlefield of a decade defined by weird, bold, and often failed inventions. But the kitchen wasn't the only arena for catastrophe. 70s fashion also failed spectacularly too. The 70s weren't just about kitchen chaos. Fashion took bold risks that often backfired spectacularly. Designers experimented with futuristic styles, bright colors, and extreme silhouettes, but some creations looked more like accidents than, trends. Take space-age jumpsuits, designed to make anybody feel like a sci-fi hero. Crafted with metallic fabrics and geometric cuts, they promised a glimpse into the future. Yet, in practice, they wrinkled instantly, stretched uncomfortably, and left wearers struggling to sit or even bend. Glamour met frustration in a tight, shiny package. And then came the platform shoes, a staple of the era's disco culture. Towering soles gave wearers extra height and a bold statement, but at a literal cost. One wrong step could result in a twisted ankle or an embarrassing fall on the dance floor. The taller the platform, the higher the risk, turning style into a balancing act. These outrageous fashion fads weren't just about aesthetics, they captured the 70s obsession with pushing boundaries, experimenting, and standing out, even if the results were sometimes hilariously impractical. If you thought we were done in the kitchen, you're wrong, because we're gonna look at some edible disasters that pushed absurdity even further. Okay, the 70s weren't afraid to experiment with flavor or confusion. Food and drinks became a playground for bold, sometimes disastrous ideas. Just consider Tang Soda, the fizzy reimagining of a powdered drink. Advertised as futuristic and fun, it promised a sparkling, vibrant beverage. Back in reality, it was far less glamorous. The mixture often fizzled uncontrollably, overflowed cups, and left a sticky, disappointing mess, proving that innovation alone doesn't always guarantee success. Then there was diet water. Marketed as a revolutionary low-calorie option, it delivered nothing but plain water. Shoppers scratched their heads. How could ordinary water need branding or a diet label? Well, as you can imagine, the concept flopped spectacularly, a humorous reminder of marketing overreach. And the piece de resistance of culinary confusion was present in the form of Jell-O salads with tuna or vegetables. Ugh. Bright, wobbly, and oddly textured, they were meant to impress at dinner parties. Instead, guests looked at the gelatinous concoctions bewildered, some daring a bite, most avoiding them entirely. And if strange food doesn't shock you, well, these toys took absurdity even further. The 70s weren't just a playground for bold flavors, they were a battlefield of bizarre toys too. Some creations were wildly popular yet utterly useless. Take the pet rock, a smooth stone sold as a companion. It required no feeding, no walking, and no training, and somehow people lined up to pay for a rock, making it a cultural phenomenon despite, or perhaps because of, its complete lack of functionality. The absurdity was undeniable, but it captured the decade's quirky spirit. And then came electronic football, a tabletop game that promised the thrill of gridiron and miniature. Yeah, players manipulated tiny pieces to simulate football plays, but the electronics were unreliable. Sparks occasionally flew, wires frayed, and frustration mounted as touchdowns turned into chaotic failures. Fun became stress in seconds, leaving many toys abandoned on shelves. These toys did highlight the 70s' willingness to push boundaries without caution, though. Some entertained brilliantly, some failed spectacularly, but all left a lasting mark on pop culture's strange, inventive decade. Speaking about being inventive, some inventions were just far too ambitious. Others were just plain bizarre and defied logic entirely. The 70s weren't satisfied with quirky toys alone. They brought bold experimentation straight into homes with clunky, unpredictable gadgets. Take talking microwaves, which promised a futuristic culinary experience. They announced cooking times and completion with robotic enthusiasm, but the reality was far less convenient. The voice was awkwardly loud, often startling users, and the appliance itself was prone to malfunction. A simple dinner became a cacophony of beeps, buzzes, and frustration, turning mealtime into a test of patience rather than an act of efficiency. And then there were disco record players, designed to bring flashy, immersive sound into living rooms. With blinking lights and rotating platters, they looked like a nightclub on a table. But these devices were notoriously unreliable. Belts slipped, motors jammed, and vibration sent records skipping across the floor. Glamour met chaos in a spectacularly disappointing package. These gadgets captured the 70s' obsession with pushing technological boundaries, ambition without refinement. Some promised the future, others delivered chaos, but all embodied a decade unafraid to experiment, no matter the risk of spectacular failure. Now, some inventions were way too ambitious, others were just plain bizarre. The 70s didn't stop at weird toys and gadgets. Personal care became a playground for bizarre inventions promising impossible results. Consider sauna belts, designed to melt away pounds while you lounged on the couch. Advertisements showed slim, toned models effortlessly achieving their dream bodies. In reality, the belts delivered little more than embarrassment. They slipped, they overheated, and often caused minor burns, turning relaxation into a cautionary tale. What was meant to be effortless transformation became awkward, uncomfortable spectacle. Then there were the mood rings, marketed as mystical instruments revealing your inner feelings through color changes. They promised insight into emotions, compatibility, and even love. Yet the rings were largely based on temperature, changing colors with nothing more than a cold finger or a warm hand. People were fascinated, but the effect was amusingly arbitrary, leaving many questioning the science or sanity behind them. These health and beauty oddities perfectly captured the era's obsession with experimentation and self-improvement, often prioritizing novelty over practicality and leaving a legacy of strange, unforgettable fads. But the strangest creations weren't just gadgets or fads, they invaded homes too. See, the 70s weren't afraid of pushing design boundaries, even when those boundaries defied all logic. Living rooms became showcases for the bizarre, shoe-shaped couches that looked more like stage props than places to sit. They were bold, attention-grabbing, but utterly impractical for everyday comfort. Then came lava lamps gone wrong, cheap knockoffs that overheated, leaked, or simply fizzled out after a couple days. Everyday items were transformed into novelties. From animal-shaped chairs to clocks that doubled as abstract art, designers seemed obsessed with proving ordinary life could be fun. But the end result often leaned more towards abstract than brilliant. It was a cultural clash between creativity and common sense, leaving households decorated like surreal art exhibits instead of cozy sanctuaries. I gotta say, the 70s loved daring ideas, but not every risk is worth remembering.